there. Yeah. You can go ahead and go live. People basically been able to hear me the entire time anyway. Yeah, Garrick had an opportunity that he couldn't skip today. So today you're doing it with the least likely trio of people. I am Nick, that you guys know, and welcome to the DCU Experience episode, whatever. We think it's 13. Maybe it's more than that. We don't know. Maybe you missed an episode. Maybe we missed an episode. I don't remember. With me, as always, or sometimes, is True, as well as Crisis. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
This will all be fixed in post. Everything will be perfect. Maybe we'll even add Garrick digitally. You know, he'll be digitally.
Maybe he's already here.
CGI replacement, Garrick.
He might be here.
Yeah. We have quite a bunch of topics to discuss for you today. Entertainment Weekly dropped a massive interview with James Gunn, our friend of the channel, really, when I'm not threatening him, about the DCU, about Peacemaker, and about a number of other topics. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you for 1 second about sponsor of the show, Gamer Subs. For all of your gamer supplement needs, or maybe you're just reading comics, you need to stay up a little later, or maybe you just like the flavor, you don't want anything with caffeine in it, we are partnered with Gamer Subs. They are a premium brand, and you can save 10% when you use our coupon or use our coupon code Key Issues. As you can tell, I'm not used to doing this. Garrett kicked me out of the host role, so I'm doing my very best. Check out Gamer Subs. Let's get into the podcast. Let's have some fun. Gentlemen, James Gunn dropped an awful lot of information on us that we haven't had a whole lot of time to digest in proper, but we're here and we're going to give it our best shot, and we're going to talk to you. As always, any questions that you guys have for us that you want us to answer live on the program, we do that at the end, and leave those in the form of a super chat, and we'll 100% reply to everything that you guys drop us in form of a question. So that being said, Crisis, you have read the entire interview. I've read the entire interview. Haven't digested it as much as you have, but kind of interested to hear what are your top thoughts in here. The majority of the interview is focused on Peacemaker in the upcoming season 2, but there's a lot of other little trinkets, a lot of other little pieces of knowledge, little stuff. Some say the best stuff. What do you think? What do you want to start with? You told me to host, but I'm going to kick it directly back over to you because I wasn't prepared.
Well, I think a lot of what was said here kind of confirms, funnily enough, what I was talking about and what I suspected in our last podcast. Because something he brings up that is probably the biggest sticking point for me was when he said that his initial idea for Peacemaker Season 2 changed over time. The final product does not really reflect his original intention. Now, I think that could mean a couple of things. It could mean that as he was developing it from, let's say, he might have even had the notion to do a season 2 when it was a DCEU property, when it was still sort of in the old guard, and that now it's sort of evolved. Obviously, that would include characters like the new Guy Gardner, the new Hawk Girl, Maxwell Lord, plot points like that. But one of my talking points from the last podcast was about how I think a lot of these projects, especially the stuff from the initial Gods and Monsters slate, is already changing, is already sort of mutating. And I think even with something like Peacemaker, that's something that's very near and dear to James Gunn's heart. Obviously, he's writing all the episodes, I'm pretty sure, and is directing many of them. So even something like that is not so much set in stone, and is subject to change throughout the creative process. So I think that's interesting. And then also a couple.
And I'm thankful that it is. I'm thankful that it is, not to butt in, because it does seem, historically speaking, that they've jumped around a lot. So let's not put them directly into a box. Marvel and DC are both very guilty of announcing stuff without a clear roadmap, and some of that stuff is predicated on the success of other stuff. And you've already seen them kind of walk back the movie The Authority. They've walked back
Waller.
If walk back Swamp Thing, my boy, just a little bush in a swamp, tried his best. Man can't get another film. Waller is dead in the water. And so we know that it's evolving. We know that it's changing, but I think that they're kind of doing their due diligence to course correct before they get to where, they're fully in the swing of things, which is when Superman launches. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, absolutely. No, those are all good points. And speaking of Superman, we know as well that James Gunn said that there's going to be a lot of crossover. Again, we already saw in that teaser with the inclusion of Hawkgirl, with the inclusion of Guy Gardner. It seems that the fallout from Superman is going to have an impact on Peacemaker. And then I think I'm probably skimming a couple of details. There's a lot we could cling on to later on, but I think maybe the biggest talking point, maybe we want to get it out of the way, maybe not, but James Gunn said there's going to be a huge cameo at the end of Peacemaker Season 2. And I think immediately that was what we all as a group latched onto because we just, of course, started speculating. So I'll pass it to True. I want to hear True's. Who does True think the cameo is?
I think the obvious one is, we'll have Superman, but we already seen the Justice League there, right? So it's one of those things where if it's Superman, it's big, it's cool, it's not surprising. And the one that I kind of want it to be is I want them to cast either I know you guys might have a problem with like a Batman or something. Give us a Batman cast with a full costume at the end of Peacemaker. I feel like that would be so awesome to not have that spoil and to see that at the end of the episode. But if it's not something like that crazy, it might just be like, here's Supergirl / Lobo is the other ones I'm thinking. I'm just thinking, who do they have around that's actively doing something? I don't know if it's a be the Lantern. So I'm guessing Lobo, Supergirl, or crazy like new casting is the three options I think we're gonna go for, right?
Yeah, we talked a bit. The internet kind of immediately picked up on the big cameo portion of this, and everybody's mind immediately kind of goes to what would be the craziest thing that they can do, and not necessarily what's the most realistic thing that they could do. I think Crisis and I talked about this in our group chat just the other day, is because the very first thing I said is what True said. It's like it would be sick if even if all we got wasn't necessarily like a full Batman actor reveal, but like that kind of cop out that happens occasionally where maybe Peacemaker is like, we see. Let me organize my thoughts. Let me frame this. Close your eyes. You don't have to look at me. We're all going to get into the zone here. I want you to visualize this. Some crazy shit has just happened in the DC universe. Peacemaker has just solved the day. His star power is higher than it's ever been in terms of heroism. We know in season 1, after the incident with the butterflies, he's rejected by the Justice League squadron, PAL, super gang, whatever the hell we're calling them in the DCU. So he's bitter. He goes through the whole season being bitter about not being the hero, not getting the recognition for the heroism that he has exhibited in the past. Here he is. He stopped another one. So what does he do? He goes to the one person in this universe that's also a rule breaker, an outcast. He's not like everybody else. He's not part of the Justice League. He's doing his own thing, and he's doing it in the goddamn city of Gotham. He pulls up on a rooftop, and you see Batman from the back, and he says, "Hey, I got something I want to talk about with you." And then it cuts away. That's all you get. You don't get the actor. You just get the background of Batman's cape, and it works for everybody. And it gets people hype.
It would be too disappointing. I think it's too easy. It's too easy to do that, right? Because I
just sold 50,000 HBO Max subscriptions, guys. You're welcome.
Sure. I would be like, okay, it's cool. It would feel a little bit unsatisfying because it's like we saw the cameo in Creature Commandos as well, right? It was it's cool, but it's so vague that nobody's questioning whether Batman exists. Let's start with that.
You're right. That's kind of the point, right? Like I'm using my lizard fandom brain who likes to see, this is the same reason that people go see Marvel movies, that they don't really care that much about these characters. Like nobody went to Black Widow or something like that to see, like they kind of go to see the Easter eggs and the goofy stuff. And I think Crisis, to his point, like I mentioned before, I was going to get to this and I never got to it because I went on my weird story vision board that I had. But Crisis kind of brought up a good point: is Peacemaker is an R-rated show. The first season was very violent, very, tremendously bad language, incredible, dialogue that you definitely wouldn't want kids to see. But Batman is, for the most part, a household name. The majority of Batman films are aimed at relatively close to all ages, whereas I would say since the Nolan trilogy, they've been skewing darker. In terms of ages, and I think, I'm not sure, is the Batman rated R, or was it rated PG-13?
I think that's a PG-13. I think Penguin might be TVMA though.
For sure. So the point I'm making is that Batman is a dark character, but he's still so well known. He's one of the four main pillars of the DC universe that you have, and inarguably he's probably the second most popular comic book character behind Spider-Man. So maybe depending on who you're talking to, one of those people isn't on the podcast today. He had something else to do. So we're gonna say it's Spider-Man, but Garrick would say it's Batman. You're not gonna have kids. To that point, you're not going to have children watching Peacemaker to see the Batman cameo. And that's the point that Crisis brought up, that I am giving him credit for, and it also took me 6 minutes to explain and get to. But if you're gonna introduce a character in this world, it's probably going to have to be somebody who might be a big cameo, but I don't know if it's going to be Superman, if it's going to be Batman, if it's going to be Wonder Woman, because of who those characters are primarily aimed at.
If you want the same tone, Lobo is the easiest. You have the
Lobo's
cast,
a good choice. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He would fit right into that world, and then you can sneak that into whatever Supergirl hype you want to build up into for next year as well.
Because
also kind of
Momoa, cameoed within season 1, right? So it would kind of be a full circle, like recurrent moment, because he was Aquaman from the DCEU alongside Ezra Miller, Flash, at the end. So it would if they, played up on that. But I also think there would be some cool wish fulfillment, or I guess, a sort of similar recursive quality. If it's one of these superheroes that Peacemaker has been, lampooning this whole time. Like, obviously he went on his big Batman rant, so there would be some, like, poetry if Batman showed up and was like, hey, listen, you've been saying all this shit about me. I have a cadre of supervillains. Or Green Arrow. I feel like at some point Peacemaker has to meet one of these real heroes that he's making up all these, falsities about. Because technically that was at the end of season 1 of Peacemaker, but half those guys were cast in shadow and legally could not defend themselves. But yeah, no, I think Lobo makes a lot of sense because, like I said, Momoa appeared. Clearly, he's very much friends with James Gunn and would do, a cameo like that without having to blow the budget up. And it would be sort of a callback, and it would also tie into Supergirl, which I think is the next project, or maybe Lanterns, but the next theatrical project. I think Lobo would be. I think that makes a lot of sense. And he's obviously, like, he will be in a PG-13 movie within Supergirl, but he definitely skews more into kind of like Deadpool will be in the Avengers movies. But the unadulterated Deadpool experience is sort of a TVMA. And I feel the same is probably the case for Lobo. Obviously, he has like his censored curse words like Bastich and etc. But I think he plays well in the Peacemaker space for sure.
It also would kind of be almost poetic if somebody like, and I hate to say this because Supergirl is such an iconic character, but if someone like Supergirl was to show up, it would really kind of cement the idea that he's not quite ready to interact with Superman on the big screen or a Batman. So like you put Supergirl there and it's like, you're close. You're just not quite there yet.
Mm.
Supergirl also is traditionally speaking a little bit darker of a character in terms of her comic book history, the types of adventures that she goes on, and things of that nature. So, any of the characters from that film could be something. And just off the top of my head, while I'm sitting here thinking about it, other characters that we're not entirely sure are in the DCU based off what we've seen. I think we can kind of speculate that they probably are. It could also be anybody from the Suicide Squad,
Yeah.
or potentially the Creature Commandos in live action, which would be all of those characters are already effectively cast in this world. That James has stated before that the same characters who do the voice work would be doing the live action work and so on and so forth. So, assuming he holds true to that, it could be somebody like the Bride who we see, or it could be Dr. Phosphorus or somebody like that who's left over. It definitely won't be Nina Mazursky.
Hey, spoilers.
I'm just saying it could be any one of those. So, but I think the word big cameo is kind of like, is kind of the trigger there. It's going to be something that really drives hype for the universe. So it's probably more than likely a Lobo, a Supergirl, a Lanterns, a Lantern we haven't seen or something of that nature. So
yeah.
Okay. Any other speculation on who we think it's going to be? Do we think Charles Xavier is going to pop out and be like, Reed Richards swings in and it's played by just shoehorned into the film?
Yeah, random Nick Fury.
Batman versus
I'm building
Deadpool.
a team.
We're getting Batman versus Deadpool in the comics, unfortunately. So I guess anything is possible.
What's the chances it's Slipknot from the Suicide Squad film?
There's no shot he says that's a big cameo.
Hold on. They said that there's an indefinite amount of time that's passed between season 1 and season 2.
There's no shot.
Sorry, that was my whole segue into this flawless podcast hosting experience, you guys. Flawless podcasting. One of the things that's most interesting about this article to me that James brought up is that he outlines when Peacemaker takes place, but like you said before, he doesn't commit to anything specifically in terms of a time frame for how long has passed. We know it's been a couple years, but we don't know how long. And the reason that's important is because James did say in this interview that having worked for Marvel for so long, he sees how difficult it has been to fit every story that you want to tell into a specific time frame of the greater overall narrative. So he's trying to avoid doing that with the general majority of some of these projects, or leaving them a bit ambiguous. So I just kind of wanted to start. I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to pass it over to my friend True, who is right next to me. How do you feel about the fact that we're going to get a little bit of a Star Wars level of, hey, maybe some stories are taking place in between here and here, kind of a feeling to this?
It's weird because I think it goes to show what we were talking about earlier of things are moving around. Most movies really don't take place over that long of a period of time. It's usually a couple of days max.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish we had a solidified timeline, at the very least, for these initial events. Because when you add more events, maybe there's a problem. But I really wish they said, okay, this happened. You don't need to give us the specific IRL years. Just say year 1 is Peacemaker, for example. And then it's been 5 years, and then Superman happens at Peacemaker season 2. Because I don't want us to get into a situation where, let's say we go into the past with whatever show, like Lanterns, for example. When does Lanterns take place? I don't want it to be some nebulous time before Superman, because I feel like it makes it harder to understand the state of the world, because there's obviously going to be stuff going on with like Creature Commandos, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The state of the world has changed based off that. And we know that's also going to be the same with the Superman movie, where Bialia and everything's going to be different. So I wish they had stuck with a specific times, so that going forward, it's easier to fit things backwards into it.
Okay. That's fair enough. I think that it's nice to have a good roadmap, but that is also, I think, and this is an important part of this, that's why guidebooks exist, and we make YouTube videos so that we can speculate on when things occur. Crisis. I almost called you by the forbidden name, but if you could also expand on your feelings around roughly having not necessarily having Peacemaker locked into a specific section of where the DCU exists.
Yeah, I think I would just like to say that, I feel this is true for all of us. We called it. I think a lot of our prognosis about these movies and shows, week after week, is just proving to be truer and truer because we've been saying this a lot. A lot of these things, the fact that these things are getting shifted around, and even the signs were all there. Just the nature of the soft reboot, that is the sort
Mhm.
of James Gunn approach to the DCEU / DCU, where it's like a Blue Beetle's probably a good example. I don't think that show is going to be set the same distance between the movie coming out and the show itself, because that's basically a whole new character, right? Like Jaime Reyes is firmly placed within that end of high school range, and I don't even know how many years it's going to be, 2, 3, 4
Yeah.
years until we get a continuation. And then obviously with the whole imperfect memory status of things like of the Suicide Squad, of Peacemaker season 1, the
Mhm.
writing's kind of been on the wall here that it's gonna be pretty fuzzy. It's not gonna be super specific. Funny thing about his exact quote is he's like, it's a non-specific amount of a couple of years, right? A couple of
Yeah.
years, obviously that is somewhat specific. But I
Yeah.
think maybe he might be referring to with Marvel, and they did do this in guidebooks, and like Nick said, the same could be true eventually of DC. But they pinpoint like months and sometimes even the exact day of certain events. So I think that's maybe what James is getting at, is like it's going to be harder, or it won't be imposed on the writers and directors to say this takes place at an exact day, but maybe we will get a year. I could see if they do a Superman 2, they'll say it's been a year or it's been 2 years, because things like that, it just, human nature, we need these context clues to be invested in these stories. But yeah, it really doesn't surprise me, and I think especially it's insightful where he's using his experiences at Marvel to sort of inform the nature of it. And it made me think too, James Gunn, when I think the whole nature of is the Defenders saga canon, proper canon to the MCU, and that sort of debate reached a fever pitch. James Gunn chimed in and was like, no, it's not canon. Kevin Feige had nothing to do with it. And then obviously, as it stands now, those shows are 100% canon to the current MCU. With Daredevil Born Again just unapologetically folding it in. So I think that's an example where James is behind the scenes sort of influence there and understanding. It really ultimately he seems to kind of maybe accepted that these things change, and he wants to have some sort of malleability there. Like, did Bloodsport shoot David Cornsweet with a kryptonite bullet? Did he only shoot Henry Cavill with a kryptonite bullet? Do we want to, like, is that a Chekhov's gun that would be left, not picked up, not capitalized on if it is explicitly made to be David Cornsweet? We talked about too. I rewatched the podcast, rewatched all the episodes lately, and I think the Harley topic as well is sort of contingent on this, where we're sort of imagining Harley's going to get retconned. So I think that has a lot to do with the nature of the non-specificity going forward. And then I also just think it again, it ties into what James Gunn said and what we said about the nature of Teen Titans and Damian's involvement in the last podcast is things are constantly changing, and we're not sure certain movies are going to be set in the present, or if they're going to be flashbacks or etc. So I think that also has a lot to do with it. I think these two things are connected for sure.
So two things that got me thinking out of there. First is that I think universes work best when you're allowed to play around within the timeline that exists there. It opens up the ability for you to tell different stories in different eras. The MCU is a great example of the first Captain America movie was set decades before the events of Iron Man and Incredible Hulk and Thor. And then, the next film came around, and obviously the events of the end of First Avenger led into the Avengers film, and then those led into Captain America Civil War and other things like that. So the thing with DC here is that they have the opportunity, like you said, to tell stories in different timelines that aren't necessarily bound to one specific canonical event that everybody has to constantly be addressing, like, say, the Snap in the MCU or the Battle of New York or the Defenders series, that took place, the big explosions that took place in that. But that also, you also said something else. This is a complete tangent from what I've just been talking about, and it's going back to, unfortunately, the cameo topic. But one thing I hadn't considered, and I think is probably the most likely scenario now that I'm thinking of it, is that big cameo being Harley Quinn.
Oh, wow.
Because that is a big cameo for that show. She does fit into the mold of a character that you would not necessarily put into a PG-13 or PG or a G-rated show. She's primarily been featured in either R-rated or PG-13 related content. She has an extensive history with Peacemaker and Amanda Waller. And her fate in the DCU as of right now is kind of unknown. So it would make a lot of sense if out of everybody from the Suicide Squad, like, obviously I was joking earlier about, like, who would show up from there, but she's probably the most likely candidate, even more likely, I'd say, than someone like Lobo or Supergirl, somebody they would want to save for a big reveal in the actual promotional material for that type of a show or film or whatever it happens to be. So that's just my two thoughts I wanted to get off the top of my head.
DC seems to be forever cursed with not being able to fully reboot. They always want to keep certain things from the previous universe, and it's never gone well.
I don't know if it even really matters that much anymore. Like the DCU, EU, and the DCU, and the old films with the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher films and Christopher Reeve's Superman, following by Superman Returns. All that stuff kind of loosely had elements tied into it to each other's, and it's never been crystal clear. But I think we're getting to something that isn't as rigid as the MCU is, but is still a fun enough sandbox for us to play in without having to worry about, like, oh, that thing couldn't have happened because Superman was fighting Brainiac on, Mechanicatron 6 at this point in the universe, so he couldn't have been there. And I think it's fine. Like, let's not limit the stories that we tell by in-universe rigid events unless there's a specific reason to do that.
I just want to know, on a quick note on that, it's just we need to be able to build a basis to move forward without messing things up. Because one of the things that made me super uninterested with the MCU, is they started doing the multiverse stuff. I've watched all those movies. I have no idea how the multiverse works. Every single movie gives me a completely different description, and they use the same words. And it's just, I'm like, okay, I just don't care.
Multiverse timeline is a timeline, like
sacred timeline.
Yeah,
universe,
is a timeline
like,
the fourth dimension of a single universe? Is it an infinite multiverse that is what constitutes the term timeline?
Like, if you're not versed in a bit of quantum theory, quantum physics, then you're probably a little lost on what they're trying to do over there, like everyone else. But that actually brings me to my next topic effortlessly. Just all around great work, True. Didn't even know you were doing this. Is one of the things that he did mention in this series, which I think allows us to play around a little bit with alternate universes, with alternate characters, and this is something that we've seen in the trailer, we've discussed a little bit in the past, is an area called the Quantum Unfolding Chamber. And this was shown in the first season of Peacemaker. It's clearly a central theme in the new season of Peacemaker, as towards the end, you can see our Chris meet another Chris, for the layman, Christopher Smith is Peacemaker's real name. So if you didn't know that, but you see our Peacemaker meeting another Peacemaker, or vice versa. We don't know the exact relationship of the two here that allows those two to meet. But it also does beg the question of, are we going to see characters from other versions of DC characters, like, potentially the DCEU, or are we going to see versions of DCEU characters that are slightly skewed, akin to like kind of how Marvel has done it with, the variant approach, maybe not necessarily as nostalgia-rific as they've done it. Thoughts in general?
I feel like all the old DC characters are way too old to come back. We already did that with Flash and CW with Brandon Routh. So, but do I want? I don't mind it being in Peacemaker. Truly, I don't mind it being in Peacemaker. I don't even mind it being a thing in the verse. It's DC. This is the home of the multiverse. It's going to exist. Let's not. But please, Gunn, I don't need like the first 3 movies to be like, oh, here's an evil version of X person from another universe or whatever. I don't need that to be the case.
It's already looking kind of scary because if you guys know, if you don't know, plug your ears, but a lot of the merchandise is on shelves now, so it's not really a spoiler per se.
Yeah.
But Ultraman, a character called Ultraman, is in the new Superman, and a lot of people have known that for a minute, but if he comes out of a quantum door and he's an evil Superman, because I agree. I think with Peacemaker, it's like like you said, it's whatever. They can do Looney Tunes stuff. You can have any weird concept from DC, but I think we are a bit too early to get like Superman punching himself. Which. Yeah,
I think it's definitely. I mean, I'm going back to the theory that I've had you can quote me on this you can look it up in previous episodes of the DCU podcast, now available where all podcasts are streamed and also on this channel, that I still think that Ultraman is going to end up being either a clone of a Superman created by Lex, or I think that's probably the most likely scenario within the DC universe, because I really don't think that they're going to start off the bat with just dicking around with the multiverse. I think that's a tremendously bad idea, and I think it almost flies in the counterproductive flag in the face of fans when James is in interviews saying the timeline between Peacemaker season 1 and 2 is a bit ambiguous, right? But we also have the multiverse. Like, he's not going to do that. He's not going to overcomplicate things to that extent. I just can't see it happening. But hold on one second. The idea of the quantum unfolding, I guess they call it what is it called? Quantum unfolding chambers. In the context of the first season with Peacemaker's father, who was the White Dragon, which is basically like the Nazi Batman, was that the quantum unfolding chamber was almost like a storage chamber for all the things that he was doing. It wasn't necessarily used as like a multiversal portal type thing, but now that we're seeing a second Peacemaker, it kind of blows the doors open to the concept of things like pocket dimensions, stuff like that. That are things that are really prevalent in pretty much every comic that you've ever read. So I don't know. That's just a thought off the top of my head.
With Ultraman, I think it's very easy just to be like either Lex or the engineer. Like, these are both smart characters that there are plenty of ways already in the movie to do that without it needing to be alternate universe.
Exactly. And can I just keep talking forever?
No,
I'm sorry, True. It's just the thought process that you have me on is that, again, we're talking. We've already opened the bag on. We've already torn down the veil on some of the marketing material. If you're sensitive to spoilers, I'm going to put my hand up right now. When I'm done talking about marketing spoilers, my hand will be down. So hand up, spoiler time. Some of the marketing has shown, specifically for figures, has shown that the DC figure, the McFarlane figure for Lex, comes with a baby kaiju, which is we know that the kaiju is a large, imposing battle that Superman has in the film. So it leads me to believe that if Lex is coming with a baby kaiju, he probably engineered that shit. Because why? How else would he have a baby kaiju unless it was like the name of the character that he's hanging around with is the engineer. That's probably what she's doing, is engineering shit. And it would make sense that she made the kaiju out of something. Potentially Ultraman is a clone. Those types of things. My hand is now going down.
And also it being, and you said this earlier, but if it's like just some pocket dimension and it's like, maybe it's also not an alternate universe, but like a clone version of him that was saved in this pocket dimension by his father. I have no problem with it. Like there is a distinction between like pocket realms and alternate universes, right? Because
true, exactly.
Yeah, like when there's just some law. For example, if you bring up magic people, you're gonna have to, or Swamp Thing, for example. The green is
Don't do it to me. Realm. Don't give me hope.
I'm just saying, if the green, or Aquaman, let's say Aquaman, the blue is like a pocket realm or something, right? So those are all completely okay to have. I have no problem. You can introduce those and introduce as many as you want. It's just specifically alternate universes that's the sticking point for me initially.
Yeah. Now, one thing Crisis did tell me in the group chat that I thought was interesting is that kind of goes back to your clone theories, that he said that he was hoping that it was like a Rick and Morty scenario where there was just infinite clones of Chris made. Crisis, do you want to expand on what you meant by that? Like, you seemed really interested in that concept.
Well, I will also.
That I just made up completely.
I'll sidestep I was like, that. I did not see that.
I'll sidestep that and bring up. It kind of ties into clones and alternate versions of the same character in a sense, and also continuity confusion, because another point that James Gunn revealed is that Michael Rooker will be playing a new character in Peacemaker Season 2, which Michael Rooker is famously Merle from Walking Dead, but he also is basically been in every James Gunn production for years. Obviously Yondu famously in Guardians of the Galaxy, but he also played Savant in The Suicide Squad, and he died very quickly. Amanda Waller blew his head up with the subdermal explosive implant.
Rest in peace to the GOAT.
Rest in peace. He had a long life ahead of him, but yeah, so he's playing someone else in this new universe, and I think we see he's got like weird mystic powers as well. He was in the trailer and he looked a lot like Savant. He had long, bleached hair, it seemed, and there's like purple flames emanating around him. So I don't know what's up with that.
His name in the show, according to the interview, is Red Saint Wild, which is just a comic book. Red Saint Wild, and that is a comic book name. And it says that he is the world's foremost eagle hunter who is on a explicit mission to kill Peacemaker's sidekick and pet Eagly, which is just an absolutely ridiculous side plot to have in the show, and I'm here for it.
Do you know what? That's fine. I have no problem. You can recast him as Eagle Hunter if you really feel like it. Right. One of the things about the interview that is interesting to me is Gunn saying that he's been pretty overworked with everything that's going on. And that worried me a little bit, because we also got the interview from Feige recently where they were like, yeah, for the last couple of years, it's just been impossible to get a hold of Feige. He couldn't really look at any of the things that were being made. I just hope that after this initial burst of making Superman, making Peacemaker, would it be sad to have Gunn not direct anymore? I think it would be a little bit sad, because he does have a...
Oh.
But
we lost True.
We lost True for about 2 seconds. I think you're back though.
Yeah, he's back.
Yeah, sir.
Sorry, gentlemen. We're going across the sea to get True on this. Sometimes with technical hurdles.
I was saying, it might be unfortunate to lose him as a director, but
we're not going to lose him.
But then I don't want him to be overworked to the point where it's like, oh, he's too busy working on Superman 2. So that then lets Lantern Season 2, maybe that falls through the cracks and he's not able to quality control or do whatever on that, because Feige's not even directing, and he's still falling behind on all the projects, and they are planning to do a lot. So I'm just wondering, in Superman 2, do we get a new director?
Well,
Right?
don't forget that there's also Peter Safran is around, and he's helping do stuff. He's not directing, but I think he's helping get, casting done, getting projects, greenlit, pre-production, post-production, helping find the right script writers, helping find the right people to put in the right roles. Kevin Feige is one of those guys who, realistically speaking, he's kind of mysterious. Like, he's always around, but we don't really know everything that he does for these films. We know that he helps. There's long been rumors that he's kind of ghost helped direct some of these projects, especially some of the more troubled ones that needed a lot of help. But with James Gunn, I think that you're bringing somebody in who is coming from a background of having worked on a bunch of these films and knows how easy it is to fall into the overworking trap. And I think that's why having two guys there that can kind of ping pong ideas and take responsibility off each other's shoulders kind of works so well for them. You're just seeing James Gunn as the figurehead of this studio, as kind of the media centerpiece, be the one giving the interviews, be the one talking about the things. And also, let's not forget that, like, his first movie is a Superman film. He's got to be there. He's got to be the guy that's front and center to bring the universe in. He's the director. He's the one whose name is on the opening crawl of the credits. So he's gonna. I anticipate you're gonna see more interviews from Peter in the future. But right now, it's kind of James is steering the ship because this is the infancy. These are the first few projects that he really helped get off the ground and go.
I've been thinking since, in the prep for the last podcast we did, and I sort of reanalyzed like the literal words that James Gunn was using for all these various announcements and products to kind of try to gauge where everything is currently. While doing that, and I think I suspected this too, I think he's going to write Batman Brave and the Bold, or whatever that movie ends up being called. I don't think he'll write and direct it, just because, as far as we know, oh wow, we got that's a pretty nice donation, isn't it?
That's massive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's definitely going to True's flight. Nice. Yeah, get some dubs in the chat. That's very nice. Thank you.
He didn't ask.
Yeah, he didn't ask a question, but we appreciate it.
That's okay.
Any question you got, man?
Ryan, if you ask a question, let us know.
Yeah. So, but I think as far as we still know, it will still be the Flash director, the Andy Muschietti is how you pronounce that. Yeah. But I think he's still going to direct. I think we'll see more instances like that going forward. I think the Superman series, I think that's on lock. I think he's just going to have total, if that ends up being a trilogy or whatever, I think he's going to have, I think that's going to be his that'll be his Guardians of the Galaxy for the DCU.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, at Marvel, we saw him, he did a lot there. He helped write scenes, including the Guardians for Infinity War and Endgame. Obviously, he did the Guardians trilogy, and then he did the holiday special, and he was also he gave notes out on a lot of the bigger MCU movies. He gave notes on Spider-Man: Homecoming. He said that outright, and so he was definitely in Feige's kind of inner circle, where he was doing a lot of work over at Marvel, and obviously there's something to be said of age catching up with him maybe. He's definitely not as spry as he was, in phase 2 of the MCU when he was brought on board. But, I think I don't foresee him directing anything really outside of Superman, if that becomes a trilogy, and then a couple of episodes of Peacemaker. But, he said outright that he's kind of reached his limit. He said he will not be doing this again. Which, that would go as far to mean he will not be writing an entire television show, which was what he did with Creature Commandos. He did not direct the animation process, but he sort of oversaw it, right, in the capacity akin to Kevin Feige, because that is also a component of Gunn's role. is sort of overseeing and giving a note for everything that comes out, and directing a movie, and then also attempting to get these scripts off the ground. Keep pointing towards authority, but I think it is worth reiterating that he tried to work with this pool of writers to get that script working, and he just couldn't do it, at least at the time. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't see any other way to look at it than there will be a bit of downsizing, like Nick said. I think there will be some delegating to Peter Safran. I think delegation certainly needs to happen. I think he needs to find a happy medium between whatever Kevin Feige does, which seems to just be like note giving and like a general brand identity, like maintaining whatever the Marvel brand is across the projects, but he doesn't have a single writer's credit or obviously a director's credit. He doesn't have any of those sort of accolades under his belt. So yeah, I think there's a sweet spot that Gunn will hit. I think he will continue to write movies and be involved with the television. And I think Superman will probably be, but I mean, James Gunn, he's not, how old is James? He's like, is he like 60 something? Like,
no, there's no way. I think
he's like mid to late 50s.
Think so.
I mean, he says he's not dyeing his hair, that he's just
he's 58.
Yeah, so he's
58, so he's
years old.
I'm 40, so, and I got the same level hair of whiteness, so his
true.
beard's a little whiter than mine, but it is, he's a little, like you said, he's got a lot on his plate, and any manager of anything knows that to be successful, you need to be able to delegate. So as you mentioned, he has to be able to delegate, or we're not going to be, we're not going to have a productive DCU for very long.
I mean, I guess it's also the fact that thinking about it is he's had he'll have 3 projects that he's written and directed, 2 of them coming out all within 12 months of each other, which makes sense that that's probably a lot more effort than what he plans to do going forward, which is also interesting where they've not said anything. They've not said the words Justice League movie yet, but is that going to be Gunn directed? Is that another, or does he let someone else take that?
Yeah. You never know. I don't know how you let that one slip through your fingers if you're the guy that controls the universe, especially if Superman comes out and makes $1 billion or something like that, or at least a substantial sum of money that Warner Brothers is happy with. He's got carte blanche, in my opinion. But that is about it for what's in the Entertainment Weekly article that we're discussing right now. Pretty much hit everything that was inside of there. We did get one relatively large, probably our largest super chat ever. So thank you, Rohan, for and his question was this is kind of for us, this is a perfect question because we love spending the last few minutes of every podcast just in absolute meltdown mode. But he said, what would be the absolute worst case scenario for an adaptation of your favorite DC character in the DCU? Like what would do maximum damage for Nightwing, Wonder Woman, and Swamp Thing, respectively? So I will start. I will because I know that we just I have a feeling that Crisis is going to lose it probably most effectively. So let's start with you. What's the biggest piece of damage you can imagine that would take place for Nightwing in the DCU?
Well, it's pretty much been my recurring nightmare since Damian was suggested or rumored to be the main Robin of Teen Titans. But I think we talk about this part of the catharsis of us talking to each other is playing through these doomsday scenarios and being like, how plausible is this, friend? Can you help me cope? But so we do a little bit of that, and I think realistically it would be some combination of Damian gets the Teen Titans side of the Robin mantle. And Dick Grayson, either it's all in flashbacks or it's all lip service, and inevitably what would end up happening is Dick Grayson Teen Titans stories, because those just are the best ones. They're also the most numerous ones. Damian would, in this adaptation, especially if it's a trilogy, would eventually sort of infringe on Dick Grayson's sort of history as that character. And then I think also in combination to that, this is like complete doomsday scenario, is similarly, James Gunn has said, and I think Brave and the Bold, I don't think it's going to necessarily be called that. I don't necessarily think that movie is going to pan out how Gunn wants it to. But as far as what he said, it will be very heavily inspired by the Grant Morrison Batman. And if you actually crunch the numbers, more issues than not of that run and his run on Batman is Dick Grayson as Batman. And so nightmare scenario that I don't know is totally implausible is Damian gets all of Dick's Teen Titans, history and credit, or most of it. And then Bruce Wayne gets, Professor Pig or James Gordon Jr. or the sort of, being the first Batman to raise Damian. And then Dick Grayson is just Bloodhaven crime fighter, right? Just sort of generic, watered down. I usually say like Arkham Nightwing is the example, because in those games, he's just there. He wears the suit, he has the Eskrima sticks, but he doesn't talk about it. It's like, who are you? What have you actually done? It's just sort of the most generic version of that character. So I think outside of ridiculous, I don't think they would ever do like Rick Grayson, where he just gets shot in the head and is an amnesiac, and he's just a complete, basically just character assassination. I don't think they would do that. I don't think that's plausible. That would certainly be probably worse, maybe debatably than what I just sort of outlined. But that's a nightmare that's been bouncing around in my head lately, for sure.
True. What about Wonder? So perfect. Thank you, Crisis in full-on Nightwing meltdown mode. True. How about Wonder Woman?
I think for me, it would be if they ended up taking the majority of their lore from New 52 Wonder Woman stuff. It would be... It's funny to me because I'm thinking about it now, and man, I don't know how much longer I would be able to actually just handle engaging with DC stuff if that was the case, because I know for a fact every single piece of DC medium coming out after that would just be that, and it would... I probably wouldn't engage with DC at all after that. If you just ignore all the post-crisis, all the rebirth, the stuff that people actually like, and they're just bloodthirsty murderers, and you have none of the super interesting stuff that's just never been shown on the screen, all the political intrigue between the multiple clans and then abandoning the gods and stuff. It's just, that would be my nightmare scenario, would be New 52 Wonder Woman as the main inspiration.
They slaughter all the men.
I'm going to say
arrive.
This. Yeah, God. They murder all the children. Like that is... Anyway, let me... The one thing that I will say this, King is still there. People might say XY about King, but King seems to be heavily in the going the post-crisis route. So I have hope, So that's my worst case scenario possible.
I think for me, it would probably be somewhere in the ballpark of having Swamp Thing be too closely into... This is going to sound weird considering everything I've said before, but I want kind of Swamp Thing to exist within his own little section of the DC universe and not necessarily interact too frequently with the larger characters like Superman's, Batman's, things like that. I think he typically tends to work best in the almost like Vertigo style of or Marvel Knight style of just kind of operating in his own little section. I think it gives the opportunity for them to tell a better, tighter story with the character without having to worry about if, Batman's going to show up or something of that nature. So overall, I would probably say that I want Swamp Thing to have his own world building occur, where we discuss the Green, we discuss the Rot, characters like that, without necessarily having to worry too much about like, are these things going to interact with what Batman's doing in Gotham or what Superman's doing? Because I think that it becomes... I just never have found him as a character to be that entertaining in the context of like larger superhero stories. I think he works better in the Justice League dark area where like he's wandering around with like Constantine, Zatanna. Like let them play in their own little corner of the DC universe, much like how the Suicide Squad members kind of play around in theirs. So that's it for me.
Yeah.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for another star-studded weekly episode that sometimes occurs every week and sometimes occurs multiple weeks away from each other episode of the DCU experience. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Next week, potentially, we'll have all new information. Or we won't, depending upon if there's something cool that happens between now and then. So thank you guys for joining. Crew, True Crisis, anything else for the general? I said crew, I combined them together. I'm sorry. Anything for the group?
No, I would just say definitely
right.
thanks to Rohan for the dono. It's very cool. We appreciate that, and
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was my Alexa telling me that someone was at my front door. If you heard that. So he flew over. He used the donation immediately. Thank you, Rohan. So thank you guys so much for joining. We'll be back next week. Use code key issues for all your gamer subs needs and all that other stuff. I'm not good at hosting. Thank you guys.